Puerto Rico was once on the rise as it was becoming more self-sufficient as a U.S. territory and likely to become the next state of the United States of America. But then, 2017 happened. Puerto Rico would take a 1-2 punch by two historic hurricanes. In early September 2017, Hurricane Irma was on a rampage across the Atlantic Basin, causing apocalyptic damage from Barbuda to Cuba. Puerto Rico was spared from the double eye wall of Irma, but hurricane-force winds caused significant damage to the island and weakened the infrastructure in place, leaving the island vulnerable for another hurricane to hit. Many thought the worst was over when Irma passed, but they could not be more wrong. On September 16th, as America and the Antilles were starting up plans to repair the apocalyptic damage from Hurricane Irma, another tropical depression formed several hundred miles away from the Lesser Antilles. However, like Irma and Matthew before, this system would go Super Saiyan. This hurricane would transform from a minimal Category 1 hurricane into one of the titans we love to fear. This hurricane would bring an apocalypse to whoever it would affect. No matter where you were not safe from this colossus. This hurricane would cause the downfall of Puerto Rico, as even several years later, it never got back on its feet and continuously relies on the American government to ensure stability. This hurricane was Hurricane Maria. In early September 2017, Hurricane Irma caused apocalyptic damage across the Caribbean and Virgin Islands before hitting Puerto Rico. Irma stayed 60 miles offshore from Puerto Rico, but in that time, the hurricane-force winds had expanded to a point where northern Puerto Rico was impacted by over 100-mile-per-hour winds and gusts. Another thing that was notable was that there were double eye walls associated with this titan, and the outer eye wall was a little too close for comfort in Puerto Rico. While it stayed out to sea, the outer bands were still very powerful. This resulted in Puerto Rico suffering considerable damage from Irma, and it weakened the island's electrical grid. As the American government began to assess the moderate damage that Irma caused and began repairs, another, far more sinister and devastating system was beginning to develop. On September 16, 2017, an invest that was slowly developing in the Atlantic Ocean became Tropical Depression 15 as rain bands and deep convection began to consolidate. 15 quickly organized into a tropical storm in 6 hours, having the now infamous name Maria. Maria continued to strengthen, with hurricane watches issued for the Leeward Islands, already battered by Hurricane Irma just a week and a half prior. Interestingly, Maria was anticipated to hit a similar area to that of Irma. However, the Bermuda high that guided Maria kept it further to the south, in conditions that were ripe for explosive strengthening. Maria became a hurricane on September 17th at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, or 2100 UTC. Hurricane warnings were issued for Dominica, Guadalupe, and Montserrat, but no one could have anticipated what came next. After Maria became a hurricane, it began to rapidly intensify. Maria's winds went from 75 miles per hour to 90 miles per hour in just 9 hours, but this was far from over. Maria began to jump categories, going from a Category 1 hurricane to a major Category 3 hurricane of 120 miles per hour in only 6 hours. Such a massive jump in intensity was quite shocking, but as hurricane hunters continued to fly into Maria, what they found was absolutely jaw-dropping. On September 18th, at 7:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, hurricane hunters found that Maria was a Category 5 hurricane, a titan like Irma, and as Maria approached Dominica, an apocalypse was about to unfold as the eye wall was just coming on shore the island. On September 18th, 2017, at 9:35 p.m., Maria made a catastrophic landfall on Dominica, making it the first Category 5 landfall in the island's history with winds of 165 miles per hour. The mountainous terrain on the island did start to disrupt this titan's circulation. and it weakened back down to a 150-mile-per-hour Category 4 hurricane. However, as Maria moved into the Caribbean Sea, in an area that is infamous for rapid intensification, Puerto Rico was on high alert after seeing this monster make landfall on Dominica, and hurricane warnings were issued accordingly. However, Puerto Rico was not prepared for Maria, as relief efforts were focused on the damage caused by Hurricane Irma. As such, 83% of the equipment in FEMA's only supply warehouse on the island was already deployed to the Virgin Islands to help those affected by Irma, and Maria would strike before they could get another shipment of this equipment from Florida. Maria began to re-strengthen, becoming a Category 5 hurricane once again on September 19th at 5:10 a.m. Hurricane Maria's finale has just begun. As Maria got closer to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, it reached a strength of 175 miles per hour, making this an apocalyptic situation for anyone in this Titan's path. The pressure sunk to 908 millibars, making this the lowest pressure recorded in the Atlantic Ocean since Hurricane Dean in 2007. Maria looked like it would be the first Category 5 hurricane to strike Puerto Rico in recorded history. However, something much worse was coming. As Maria reached peak intensity, an outer band near the eye began to strengthen considerably, and it became an outer eye wall. This outer eye wall was much wider in diameter than the inner eye wall, and would first show its strength by hitting St. Croix in the Virgin Islands. However, an eye wall replacement cycle began, and the inner eye wall was killed off by the outer eye wall, sucking all of its energy from this stronger eye. Soon, Maria began weakening, dropping to 160 miles per hour at 3 a.m. on September 20th. Maria weakened down to a Category 4 hurricane with winds of 155 miles per hour 2 hours later. But what it did do was it expanded its wind field considerably. Before the ERC, hurricane force winds extended out 35 miles from the center. Afterward, they extended out to over 60 miles, putting the entire island in the line of these catastrophic winds. On September 20th, 2017, at 6:35 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Maria made landfall as an apocalyptic Category 4 hurricane with winds of 155 miles per hour. The entire island lost power, and hurricane force winds tore entire cities apart. 20 feet of storm surge caused entire communities to be swept away. Countless mudslides occurred with the storm, burying people in the hundreds. Catastrophic flooding was also occurring due to the excessive rainfall with Maria. This Titan would continue to move over Puerto Rico. Every minute it was there only caused more devastation to the already weakened island. Maria's eye moved offshore at 2 p.m., and it would bring massive flash flooding and amounts of rain to the Dominican Republic. By this point, land interaction with Puerto Rico led Maria to weaken down to a Category 2 hurricane with winds of 110 miles per hour. After moving offshore, however, Hurricane Maria re-strengthened into a Category 3 major hurricane with winds of 125 miles per hour on September 22nd. But that was as strong as it would get past this point. Maria moved over gradually more hostile conditions in the Atlantic, gradually weakening down to a Category 1 hurricane off the coast of North Carolina. After this, Maria became a tropical storm and moved to the east at over 60 miles per hour, becoming one of the fastest tropical cyclones in Atlantic history. Finally, on October 2nd, 2017, after lingering in the Atlantic Ocean for more than 10 days, Maria dissipated, leaving behind an apocalypse. In Dominica, the damage was apocalyptic. 85% of Dominica's structures were destroyed, leaving almost everyone on the island homeless. The first aerial footage on September 19th showed a nation in ruins. All the crops that were on Dominica were wiped out, and almost all the fresh water sources were contaminated by Maria's storm surge, causing a true humanitarian crisis on the island. In total, $1.37 billion in damage occurred, which is 225% of its GDP, resulting in the UN having to step in and provide aid to Dominica, and it is believed that 100 people were killed. 64 confirmed, but 36 others are missing even 5 years later and presumed dead. Puerto Rico by far suffered the most devastation. The result in Maria was an apocalypse across the whole island of 3.4 million people. Hundreds of thousands were now homeless due to Maria's impacts, and catastrophic flash flooding lasted for several days until the water receded. Everyone in Puerto Rico was affected, and the agriculture sector in Puerto Rico was destroyed, with coffee being the most effective. The U.S. military had to be called in to rescue tens of thousands of stranded Puerto Rico. The U.S. military had to be called in to rescue tens of thousands of stranded Puerto Ricans and bring supplies to the island. However, the equipment that FEMA had left did not make a dent into helping Puerto Rico, and it resulted in many rural areas being affected even to this day. In total, over $90 billion in damages occurred in the island, making Maria the third costliest hurricane in recorded history, behind Katrina and Harvey. The original death toll released by the Puerto Rican government was 64, and this was not accepted at all due to the apocalyptic amount of damage caused by Maria. In June 2018, 9 months after Maria, the Puerto Rican government rose the death toll to over 3,000 people, after several lawsuits were filed in order to release the actual number of those who perished in Puerto Rico. This remains a huge controversy to this day on the island, with some saying the death toll could be even higher than that. As a result of Hurricane Maria, Puerto Rico had to, as of 2022, still be dependent on the American government to effectively survive as a territory. Many communities haven't recovered since Maria and likely won't for years, or potentially decades. This was Puerto Rico's worst natural disaster by far, and I pray for the people of Puerto Rico who went through this disaster and basically what was hell. And with that being said, I really hope you got something out of this documentary. Be sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Stay safe.